I've never really shared this experience with anyone except my mom, a few close friends, and my boyfriend, but I don't think that they realize how much this still impacts me. I recently discovered this subreddit, so I'm hoping sharing my experience will lift a weight, if you will. I worked a fairly entry-level office job in a mixed commercial and industrial area in my community. Because of the nature of most of the work in the area, mostly manufacturing and construction type jobs, it wasn't uncommon to see people walking around with canvas pants covered in oil and a little dingy looking. I carpooled with my mom since she worked nearby, and that particular day, my mom had called me to tell me she was going to be half an hour late picking me up. Instead of waiting at my work for her, I decided I would walk to the coffee shop nearby and wait there. It was late in the afternoon, 4 p.m., so very quiet. I was the only customer in the shop when I sat down at the table to read a newspaper. A few minutes after I sat down, a very handsome middle-aged guy walked in a few minutes behind me. He was very attractive and had a very comfortable charm to him, but it really struck me how clean he looked for the area, especially wearing coveralls and work boots. I didn't think too much of it at first, honestly, so when he asked me if he could sit with me and chat while he waited for his own drive, I said okay. We actually had a nice conversation for a little while, until he started asking personal questions about me. They weren't very specific questions, but in hindsight it seems really weird to me. I just kept talking, even though I started to get a really strange vibe. I started to get really uncomfortable when I asked him what he did for a living. He told me he worked at a nearby manufacturing place, and that he had been working there for about a year. He then told me it was the first job he ever had, so he was really excited about continuing his career there. Remember, this guy is middle-aged. Not only what he said, but how he said it struck me as strange. This became my first bold and waving real red flag to get the fuck out. I instantly had a moment where I was like, wait a sec. What middle-aged man is only 1 year into his first job? Especially in an area that can't really be shrugged off as prolonged education, rich parents, or anything of the like. To me, that screamed recent prison release. On top of that, for him to be so clean despite him saying where he worked, nothing was adding up. I immediately started texting my mom under the table, and said that I was really uncomfortable and she needed to come ASAP. I continued talking to him like nothing was weird, but deep down I was really regretting telling him anything about myself, in case he decided to follow me. When my mom pulled into the parking lot, I quickly thanks bye'd out of there, and hopped into the car. As she pulled out of the parking lot, I see him leave the copy shop and hop into his own car. Now, remember in our conversation he had told me he was waiting for a drive. If I had been paying attention to him as he came in, I would have realized that it was a lie, and he drove himself there. I could have avoided the whole situation. Obviously at this point I'm freaking out. I quickly explained to my mom what was going on, and she sped off down the street. I looked behind us, and who was there? The guy in his car. She purposely duck and dove down all sorts of bizarre streets and went in circle after circle. He followed us for close to 30 minutes before finally giving up. I don't know why I didn't report my experience to the police. I was just so shocked that something like that would happen. I went on with my life and shook it off as if nothing had happened. Fast forward about a week, and my mom picks up a newspaper, only to find that on the front page there's a picture of this one and same very handsome man. He had kidnapped a woman and shoved her into the trunk of her own car, drove her while she was in the trunk about 200 miles to another city, and forced her to take all of the money out of her bank account. He then abandoned her there with no wallet and no vehicle. If not for my mom, I could have been so screwed. Fortunately, the woman was not physically injured or sexually assaulted, but I can't imagine spending hours in the trunk of your own car, not knowing what someone was going to do to you. It's been about 7 years since this happened, and I still have some very serious trust issues with strangers. I didn't work in that area much longer, as it became too difficult for me. While I did work there, I had previously gone to that particular coffee shop daily during my lunch breaks, and still, to this day, I've never been back there. This is my first post. I've read a lot on Let's Not Meet, and it made me think of this situation I had in high school with somewhat of the creepy persuasion. I didn't really realize how messed up it was at the time because everyone was telling me to brush it off. Anyway, here we go. When I was 15, I got my first job in my tiny rural town at an artisanal tea shop. Once the summer months rolled around, my job became working in an iced tea stand outside. It wasn't a bad gig, but it did inspire a lot of irritating and slightly creepy individuals to talk to me for long periods of time. One day, this scruffy guy who seemed a bit off wanders over to my tea stand and starts chatting with me. I kept trying to steer the conversation towards him buying an iced tea, but he was only concerned with talking about me. We'll call him Tom. He starts asking me how old I am, where I go to school, my name, and that sort of thing. As I was still young and naive, I told him all about it, trying to be friendly. Tom then proceeds to tell me his entire life story. He told me how he was in his early 30s and his girlfriend died. He overdosed on heroin on a bathroom floor. No exaggeration, he stood there for hours going into detail, until my boss had to come out and tell my friend to leave. I was definitely put off, but thought it was more sad than anything else. The next day at work, Tom comes back to my job. The moment I saw him, my stomach started turning. Great, another day of being annoyed. Tom immediately pulls out a 10-page handwritten love letter that he wrote for me. I began reading it, but it was mostly just literary porn. He then continues to tell me he's never met anyone like me, and how I wasn't tainted by the world yet. This guy flat out told me I was his angel sent from heaven. Great. The next few days, Tom comes back every day I work with a letter. Eventually, I just begin throwing them out or refusing to take them, and my boss had to tell him he wasn't welcome around there anymore. If this is where it had ended, I probably would have forgotten about it by now. When he lost his chance to contact me while I was working, he started messaging me on Facebook. I recently looked back at some of the messages he sent me. One in particular was a fiction story he wrote about me, the conclusion of which was basically that he decided I was too beautiful to exist and that my existence was torturing him, so he pushed me off a cliff. I would block his account, and he would make new ones and message me poems, stories, and letters from there. After a while, he must have gotten sick of me telling him to fuck off, and stopped messaging me. Fast forward about 1.5 years. I'm 17 and working at a dingy restaurant in the same town. It was a very laid-back job, and I got along well with all my coworkers. One day, to my dismay, I see Tom walk through the door. I kid you not, I saw this guy's whole face light up with glee when he saw me. I was surprised he didn't see the horror written all over mine. Again, he comes straight to me and doesn't buy anything, just starts immediately saying how I still look like an angel. I think he found me working there by accident, but once he figured it out, he wasn't giving it up. He started coming back every single day again and messaging me on Facebook all over again. I couldn't believe he was still doing this. One coworker I was close with, we'll call him Max, started picking up my vibe when this guy came in. He ended up telling me that he went to high school with him and he got in trouble for stalking more than one girl. In addition, for having a lot of drug issues. Basically, he was bad news. The next time Tom came in, there happened to be nobody else in the restaurant, and Max told him not so subtly to walk out and not come back. He didn't. To this day, Tom will still occasionally message me on Facebook from a blank account to tell me how much I'm torturing him. I'm not sure if he ever had real malicious intentions for me, but for the sake of my sanity, let's not meet again. Hey y'all. Long-time lurker, first-time poster. You know how it is. I'd actually forgotten about this incident until recently, when my memory was jogged by seeing a few other stalker-type stories on here. I downplayed it at the time, which seems disturbingly common, and it's only now in hindsight that I realize how skeevy the whole situation actually was. This gets pretty wordy, but bear with me. So this was some years back, when I was only 16. For reference, I'm a girl. My family had recently moved cities, so it was a whole new neighborhood. New school, new friends, all that good stuff that comes with a more major move. I had to get used to not being able to walk to school, too. I had to take the bus downtown, and then walk from there to get to where my school was, which was a first for me. All of my previous schools had been within walking distance. Now, the bus system itself wasn't a problem at all. What became a problem was that apparently someone started watching me at the bus stop. About 3 months or something after the move, I created a Facebook profile for the sake of some competition or other. You know, like this Facebook page for a chance of winning this and that. I had nothing else on this profile at all beyond my name. This was before it was borderline mandatory to be active on Facebook. No picture. No information. Hadn't even added any friends. It was blank save for 1 or 2 liked pages. I had halfway forgot I even made the damn profile. But then after a few days I got an email alert for a message on Facebook, so I went to see what was up. It was from an account that was just as empty as mine, and simply said, "You're cute." I was and still am pretty cute, but nothing out of the ordinary. What puzzled me the most was obviously how whoever this person was would know that, because I didn't recognize the profile name at all. And of course, my profile didn't even have a picture. I replied with something along the lines of, "Thanks, but how would you even know?" I wasn't really seeing any red flags yet. I was a little curious and a little flattered. I was a bit naive, I suppose. So I got back. "I've seen you at the bus stop." And that didn't quite sit right with me, obviously. At the same time, though, I was telling myself it wasn't really a big deal, and I didn't feel too worried or anything. It was a very nice neighborhood, and I'll mention that I'm from Sweden, which is generally safe. Still, that didn't explain how he'd know my name, which is what I asked him next, how he recognized me. He said he wouldn't tell me unless I added him on MSN, the chat client predominantly used at the time, and talked to him on there. After a little back and forth, I gave in and added him, primarily because I wanted to know how he'd gotten my name at all. It's not a common name, and I was feeling a little antsy about that. Part of the reason we'd moved was to get away from a few people. I felt that I had to know how he'd found me, so I'd know in case any other people did. His text language was pretty flirty and all. He threw lots of winks and smileys, but from the way he typed, I got the impression he was around my age. He had a year on his username that I assumed was his birth year, and if that was true, he was actually a year younger than me, so I still didn't feel too worried. But I got pretty uncomfortable when he told me how he'd worked out what my name was. It was from the school yearbook, which didn't seem that much of a stretch at first. I know, but the thing is that in this city that I'd moved to, what they do is that they compile all schools of the same education level in the city in the same book. So we're talking about 15 schools in that one book, and a few hundred pages of photographs. And he'd gone through all of them to find my face and name. I actually checked when he told me this. I wasn't in any obvious place in this book at all. I had no particular spot dedicated to me, or any activity I was in. It was just this group photo of my class, around 25 students, I think about 2/3 through the book. Plus, If he really was a year younger than me, he himself wouldn't be in that yearbook or have any ready access to it because he'd be in a different level of education. This didn't cross my mind at the time, but again, if he was a year younger than me, what? He'd either have to look through his yearbook first, then moved on to a yearbook that wasn't for him, or he'd seen me at school too, and had known to look in the right one for that reason. I didn't really tell him that it creeped me out, but he'd started chatting with me on occasion from then on, about mostly normal or inane stuff, so that was fine, I guess. Always with this flirty tone, though. I replied neutrally, or sometimes played along, trying to get an idea of who he was. He said he was a neighbor, and that's why he'd seen me at the bus stop, but he never told me what he looked like. And when I was at the bus stop, nobody ever came forward as him, or signaled in any way that they might be. Like I said, I didn't recognize his name, if it was even real. He definitely wasn't from our apartment building, though, and for some reason I didn't quite believe him when he said he was from the same neighborhood. So I started to feel pretty uneasy at the bus stop when there were other people there with me, wondering if one of them was him, if he was watching me. But waiting alone at the bus stop didn't really help either, because I started wondering if he was watching me from somewhere else. And the stop was situated near a grocery store with a parking lot, so he could have been. I'm pretty sure he did tell me, "You looked cute today," or something similar at least once or twice, but I honestly don't remember much what we talked about anymore when we did chat. I did remember they were never long sessions though, only 10 minutes to a half hour or so, and I started not really liking seeing him sign on, but for some reason I didn't block him, probably because I still felt I had to work out who he was, and because, well, I didn't feel threatened by him, just uncomfortable, until at some point when he told me, "I figured out where you live," acting as if that wasn't creepy at all. That skeeved me the fuck out. I asked him where he thought I lived, which was maybe a stupid move, but yeah, he gave me the right number, and the right floor, the right apartment too, and at that point I was definitely feeling less uncomfortable and more scared. He went on to say that he worked this out because a friend of his had lived in our apartment prior to us, and that the timeline for me appearing and his friend moving out made sense. I didn't believe this at all. In that case, he'd have worked out where I lived a lot sooner. And if he had, why was he only telling me this now? To fuck with me? But if he hadn't found out that way, then what? Had he followed me from the bus stop? I don't remember what I told him, but that scared me big time. A day or so after that, he sent me a message that was something along the lines of, "Maybe I'll come over and say hi." I don't remember the exact wording, but it actually read very threatening to me. It read differently than the other fairly normal stuff we'd talked about before, and I had such a spike of fear when I got that message. It didn't matter finding out who he was. I didn't want him to come over at all. I remember looking out my bedroom window and being relieved there was nobody outside. I sent him a message back that I didn't want him to come over, ever. He sort of threatened that he would, and then he signed off. I blocked his email and his goddamn empty Facebook profile, and then after I'd done that I was left feeling really anxious and frightened, thinking that maybe now he'd come over anyway once he realized I'd cut off all his other options, that maybe he was on his way right now. And then what would he do? I didn't really fear rape or murder. It was a little too abstract to me at the time, but I was still really scared. And for a while after that, I was scared at the bus stop too. I was scared walking home from it, in particular after school. But nothing happened after I blocked him. It all just kind of ended there, which in hindsight I consider myself extremely lucky. I was definitely dumb and naive at the time, because I didn't mention any of this to my mom or stepdad, and if whoever this guy was hadn't been willing to give up on me, or lost interest, or whatever happened with him, things could have gotten really, really ugly. I was always waiting at the bus stop myself, and I was often home alone if I'd had a shorter school day, and he knew my name, where I lived, and I'll say it again, I was only 16. It's possible it was just some socially awkward kid with a distant crush and not knowing how to handle it. But thinking back on it, it just seems like it had to be more than that. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave feedback in the comments below, or perhaps like, share, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have a personal story that you'd like to send in, or if you'd just like to message me sometime, go ahead and take a look in the description below. There will be links to all of my social media accounts, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter account. Go ahead and check any of those out and send me a message, and I'll try to include your story in a video or get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline the name of the story and any possible themes it might have, as well as how you'd like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious at all about the music used in today's video, you can go ahead and check down there in the description. The music is always listed in the description below, in the order which it appears. I also name the tracks and provide links to the artists if you feel like checking out more of their work. Last but not least, if you guys have any constructive criticism, please feel free to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.